Come scrapbook with me while I talk about Vocaloid Avanna. Avanna is a female English Vocaloid from the V3 era. She released in 2012 and is 18 years old canonically. I was like 17 when she released, so I always interpreted her as being super mature because I was younger than her. But now that I'm 29, I'm like, no way. Avanna was developed and released by Zero G. They're the company that released the first two Vocaloids ever, Leon and Lola. She is specifically Celtic inspired, and her voice provider is Irish. At the time, Avanna's only other modern Vocaloid competition was Oliver, and of course all the Vocaloid 1 and 2 voice banks at the time. But in terms of Vocaloid 3, it was Oliver. Despite the fact that the first two Vocaloids were actually English, Vocaloid just was not that popular in the West. Like Hatsune Miku was popular, but the idea of English Vocaloids wasn't really that popular. It was actually more common that you would find people hating on English Vocaloids. So the Vocaloid 3 era was kind of the turn of this a little bit, especially with the release of Oliver, who was hailed as the most realistic English Vocaloid at the time. Oliver, who released a year prior to Avanna. So Avanna's release was a big game changer for English Vocaloids and Western producers. She was the clearest and most realistic English Vocaloid for the time, and she would hold that title for a good few years. Avanna did have a bit of a slow start with producers. She was pretty popular with the indie Western producers, like me. But it wasn't until a very big and notable musician picked her up. That musician was Porter Robinson. Avanna is the Vocaloid that you hear in songs like Goodbye to a World and Sad Machine. I know Goodbye to a World is actually pretty popular here on TikTok, but 10 years ago it was Sad Machine that was the big one. With the release of Sad Machine, Avanna flew. She flew for an English Vocaloid. Porter Robinson brought a lot of attention to Avanna for the time, so for a couple of years she had an uptick in popularity. That uptick never went anywhere near the popularity of Oliver, however. So when I say she was popular, I mean like with Western producers pretty much. Avanna was designed by Aki Glancy. At the time, Aki was a pretty big producer known for her very, very sad ballads. She's the producer behind the Undertale song that goes like, "Oh Mary, contrary," that one. With the Celtic theme in mind, Aki conceptualized a lot of different themes. Some of these ideas were like a fairy, a princess, a guard, an angel, a dancer. Ultimately, Aki and Zero G landed on the idea of an elf. So we're gonna stick a pin in Avanna for a hot second, because now we're gonna talk about Spanish Vocaloids Bruno and Clara. Bruno and Clara were the first two Spanish Vocaloids to ever release. When they debuted, their designs were not aimed at the fandom. They were just two normal people in a very Western art style. That pissed off the Spanish community. The very first Vocaloids they ever got were not aimed at them, and it led to a lot of backlash, which ultimately led to Bruno and Clara being redesigned with an anime art style. This backlash would actually go on to affect Avanna. Let me just that pin out of Avanna real quick. Aki Glancy had originally designed Avanna to be more elf-like, with a slightly more realistic art style. Yamaha didn't like that. They were scared. They were scared of the backlash. So they made Zero G and Aki go back in and make Avanna have an anime art style, which is really fascinating to look back on, because a lot of Vocaloids prior to Avanna were trying to appeal to fandom and non-fandom producers. When Hatsune Miku popularized Vocaloid, Vocaloid became another quote-unquote anime thing. So a lot of general Western musicians had no interest in Vocaloid. They considered it a joke. So a lot of English Vocaloids were trying to mend that bridge a little bit. So it's fascinating that at some point Yamaha was like, nope, just anime, all anime, we have to be anime. It's not a bad thing necessarily, but it's fascinating how much the designs of Vocaloid have changed over the years. Avanna was planned to have a male counterpart from the beginning, another Celtic Vocaloid. Zero G had scattered out voice providers, but ultimately never made the voice bank. Like years passed and Vocaloid 4 dropped, and it got to the point of like, when is the male counterpart coming back from the war? Yeah, he didn't come back from the war. That male counterpart was cancelled after a few years. Whereas Avanna today, well, she's still in Vocaloid 3. She has since been dethroned as the clearest and most realistic English Vocaloid.
She'll always be the best in my heart, though.
As for Porter Robinson, though, he actually went on to make his own Vocaloid, Pouta. Listen, Spanish speakers and Filipinos, it's not what it sounds like. It's Pouta. It's a Japanese pun on porter. Pouta actually had a really strong start and never really went anywhere. Like, I never seen anything with him. But in some respects, it's kind of like the male counterpart that Avanna never got. Like, not officially, but in our hearts. Bucarino!